Right now, in Upton County, Texas, a ranch is being swallowed by the earth. A well drilled in the 1950s and plugged in 1977 just ripped back open, and the sinkhole around it has spread to 200 feet across with crude oil pooling at the surface. 60 miles northwest, two massive sinkholes near the town of Wink keep growing after more than 40 years. And between them, satellites picked up the ground across 4 entire counties, shifting by as much as 40 inches in just 2.5 years. The Permian Basin pumps nearly half of all American oil. It powers American energy. And right now, it ranks among the most shaky and unstable regions in the country. Every data point coming in from every angle says the same thing. It keeps getting worse. The sinkhole on Bill Kelton's ranch in Upton County showed up in early 2025. It sits right on top of the Radford Grocery No. 17. Well, first drilled in the 1950s and sealed for good in 1977. That seal held for almost 50 years. Then the ground split open, 200 feet wide, 40 feet deep, and crude oil started creeping to the surface. Kelton told reporters the hole had doubled in size in weeks. "It's suddenly much larger," he said, "and it suddenly got oil." That single well went into the ground nearly 7 decades ago. The company that drilled it no longer exists. The company that plugged it no longer exists. The state keeps no record of who should answer for what happens now. And this well sits on a list of at least 8,925 orphaned wells tracked by the Texas Railroad Commission. The true number of idle, unplugged wells in Texas lands somewhere between 115,000 and 476,000, depending on how you count. None of this would matter much if old wells just sat there doing nothing. They do not. On Ashley Watt's 22,000-acre Antina Ranch in Crane County, well control expert Hawk Dunlap checked 150 of the property's 330 wells. Every single one leaked despite being plugged. Every one. The cement casings cracked, the steel corroded, and fluids moved through rock layers they were never meant to reach. Watt sued Chevron over the damage. Her lawyer, Sarah Stogner, started calling them zombie wells because they keep coming back to life after they are supposed to be dead. And here is what ties all of this to the sinkholes. The Permian Basin sits on top of the Salado Formation, a roughly 800-foot thick layer of salt and rock between 400 and 670 meters below the surface. When water reaches that salt, it eats through it. Slowly, invisibly, hollow pockets open underground. The roof of each pocket gives way, and the collapse works its way upward, layer by layer, until the surface drops. The question is how the water gets there. And the answer, in many cases, is through the very kind of wells that leak on Ashley Watt's ranch and cave in on Bill Kelton's land. Badly sealed and ditched drill holes from as far back as the 1920s act as tunnels, feeding water into layers that would have stayed solid for hundreds of years. What comes next still does not sit right with a lot of people watching from outside Texas. The Wink sinkholes show what this process looks like at full scale. On June 3, 1980, the ground near the town of Wink in Winkler County caved in around the old Hendrick No. 10, a well drilled in 1928. The crater measured 360 feet across and 112 feet deep. Pipelines vanished into the hole. That was Wink Sink No. 1. 22 years later, on May 21, 2002, a second sinkhole ripped open a mile to the south, centered on a water supply well that had pumped roughly 800 million barrels of water for oil field work. Wink Sink No. 2 started at about 450 feet across. Today, it stretches between 670 and 900 feet wide, with the eastern wall still crumbling westward at about an inch per year. Both sinkholes remain active. The city of Wink warns on its website that they have expanded from the time they first formed, making it unsafe to visit. The town of Wink, home to 940 people, sits 1 mile from Wink Sink No. 2. Former Winkler County Sheriff George Keeley drove a reporter out to the craters and pointed at the ground. "See 'em?" he said, waving at cracks running through the desert. "They're all through this field. It's unstable. The land is real unstable." And then he added, "We don't lose sleep over it." And then came the data that changed the whole picture. About 1 kilometer northeast of Wink Sink No. 2, researchers from Southern Methodist University spotted a zone they call the Wink Sag. Using high-detail radar from the TerraSAR-X satellite, SMU research scientist Jin-Woo Kim measured peak sinking there of more than 60 centimeters per year, and speeding up, Kim called it an alarming precursor to a possible new sinkhole and warned that the area holds oil and gas gear, hazardous pipelines, and 2 towns. Robert Trentham, a senior teacher at UT Permian Basin who has walked the sinkholes on foot since 2002, pushed back. "There's a component of nature and a component of man in there," he said. "It's a really complex story. On whether the 2 craters will merge, in geologic time, possibly. In human time, no. That split itself tells you something. The surface readings say one thing, the deep rock says another. And 940 people wake up between those 2 answers every morning. The sinkholes took decades to grow. The next wave of the crisis moved in months, not years." In 2018, Jin-Woo Kim and his colleague Zhang Lu published a study in Nature's Scientific Reports that shifted how Earth scientists viewed the whole region. Using satellite radar images, they mapped ground movement across 4,000 square miles of 4 counties: Winkler, Ward, Reeves, and Pecos. What they found was shifting of up to 40 inches, more than a full meter, in just 2.5 years. Not at the sinkholes. Across the basin, the ground movement we're seeing is not normal, Lu told reporters. The ground doesn't typically do this without some cause. The cause, in large part, comes down to wastewater. For every barrel of oil the Permian Basin pumps, between 3 and 10 barrels of toxic water come up with it. That water has to go somewhere, and in the Permian, it goes back underground. About 15 million barrels of used water get forced into disposal wells across the basin every single day. In Reeves County alone, yearly disposal volumes went from 16.9 million barrels in 2010 to 1.2 billion barrels in 2024. That amounts to a 7,000% jump in 14 years. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. We cover geography and earth science events like this, with the full picture you need to follow what is going on. By 2025, the fallout from that pressure buildup could no longer be brushed off. A 2024 study in Geophysical Research Letters traced a January 2022 blowout in Crane County, which gushed nearly 15 million gallons of brine before being capped, to a cluster of 9 disposal wells 12 miles to the northeast. The ground near those wells had risen more than 15 inches in under 3 years. The researchers warned that more blowouts could follow and noted the high-pressure zone sits less than 5 kilometers from the Pecos River. In October 2024, a well blowout near Toya in Reeves County shot a 160-foot-tall geyser of toxic water into the air that sprayed for weeks before crews brought it under control. The cost to cap those 2 blowouts alone topped $9 million. The road damage spread even further. Highway 115, running from Andrews to Kermit to Wink, split open with cracks 6 inches wide and up to 3 feet deep. The Texas Department of Transportation's Odessa district marked the danger with cones and barrels, but the road kept shifting. Winkler County Road 204 closed entirely from the cracking. Near Imperial, a highway needed regrading twice, at a cost of over $1 million, with a full reroute priced above $10 million. Near a Crane County sinkhole, the damage grew so bad, the state spent an estimated $30 million fixing a single rural highway. At Wink Sink No. 1, photos show a pipeline physically twisted and bent by the force of the collapse, stretched across the crater like a strip of warped metal. That was only half the picture. The earthquake data made everything worse. In 2021, Texas logged 177 quakes across the Permian Basin. By 2023, that number reached 2,359. In 2024, it hit 9,238. The climb tracks almost perfectly with the rise in water disposal volumes. Since 2020, the region has felt at least 10 earthquakes at 5.0 or above. A 5.4 near the Texas-New Mexico border in November 2022 was the biggest Texas quake in 3 decades, felt as far away as Albuquerque and El Paso. The damage turned real. On February 14, 2025, a 5.0 quake 33 miles northwest of Toya cracked a natural gas pipeline, sparking a fire. It marked the 3rd pipeline break in 19 months. 2 months later, a 5.4 struck near White City, New Mexico, felt by roughly 915,000 people. A December 2024 special issue of the AAPG Bulletin, led by Peter Hennings and Katie Smye of UT Austin, pinned down 7 separate quake systems in the Permian Basin, all tied to disposal. The work found that roughly 45 billion barrels of wastewater have been forced underground since 2009, with deep disposal triggering the strongest quakes on faults as far as 40 kilometers from the wells. The Railroad Commission fought back by setting up seismic response areas with disposal limits across several zones. On June 1, 2025, The commission issued new rules for saltwater disposal permits across the entire Permian Basin, the first update since 1982. And no, I am not making that up. The guidelines for where and how billions of barrels of toxic water get pumped underground had gone untouched for 43 years. Pay attention to this next part, because it explains a lot about why the fix took so long. 3 elected officials run the Texas Railroad Commission. All 3 carry deep money ties to the oil and gas industry they are supposed to watch over. A report by Commission Shift and Texans for Public Justice found that 66% of their combined campaign funds, around $10 million, came from oil and gas companies. Commissioner Christy Craddock, born and raised in Midland, pulls in royalties topping $2 million per year from oil and gas lease deals. She has voted more than 320 times on items tied to companies that pay her family. Craddock herself admits the plugging math falls short. "We have more orphan wells coming on than we are plugging," she told the Texas legislature in May 2025. The state plugged roughly 1,750 wells in fiscal year 2024. The net count of orphan wells dropped by only 73. In June 2025, the legislature cleared a one-time $100 million budget for well plugging and passed SB 1150, which tells operators to plug wells sitting idle for 15 or more years. The industry backed it. Rancher Skylar White said it had too many gaps. Virginia Palacios of Commission Shift called it a soft touch. The final deadline to comply stretches to 2042. The ranchers refuse to wait. Billy Wayne Meister Jr. filed a lawsuit in December 2025 against 8 oil and gas companies claiming massive harm from disposal wells blowing out on his Crane County land. Ashley Watt presses on with her case against Chevron. Skylar White keeps showing up before the Railroad Commission and the legislature to talk about saltwater ruining his cattle grazing land. These are not protest groups. They are families who have worked West Texas ranches for generations, watching the ground beneath them turn hostile. Meanwhile, the Permian Basin puts out 6.5 million barrels of oil per day. That covers roughly 48% of all U.S. oil. The basin adds over $100 billion a year to the American economy, brings in nearly $13 billion in state tax money between Texas and New Mexico, and supports roughly 860,000 jobs. If the Permian Basin were a country, it would rank among the top 5 oil producers on Earth. And the wells that are not caving in or blowing out are leaking something else. MethaneSat, the sharpest methane tracking satellite ever launched, picked up roughly 440 tons of methane per hour escaping from Permian Basin sites during its first year of readings. Over 3 million metric tons per year from the Texas side alone. The satellite caught a sharp split at the state line. Methane loss on the Texas side ran at 3.1% of sold gas. On the New Mexico side, where rules demand 98% gas capture, it ran at 1.2%. Same rock, same basin, different rules, different outcome. And somehow, it gets worse. MethaneSat went offline in June 2025 when its signal cut out. The best tracking tool the world had for Permian Basin leaks is gone. And for every one of those 6.5 million barrels pumped each day, up to 10 barrels of toxic water must be forced underground into rock layers that satellite data now shows are overfilled and breaking apart across thousands of square miles. Katie Smye of UT Austin summed up the core of the problem. Pore space for injection has not been traditionally thought of as a resource to be managed effectively, she said. It's been thought of as something to race to fill. The ground beneath the Permian Basin does not care about oil prices, output goals, or rulemaking timelines. It reacts to pressure. And every marker scientists track, the sinking rates, the disposal volumes, the quake counts, the blowout tallies, keeps climbing. The real question is not whether the Permian Basin is breaking apart. The satellites already answered that. The question is whether the people and groups in charge of the most productive oil field in the Western Hemisphere can close the gap between how fast the ground moves and how fast they respond. Right now, the ground is